So thinking about a typical training week, obviously there's going to be some degree of variation depending upon kind of where
Mm.
you are in your season or where you are throughout the training year. But and we were speaking a little bit off air kind of about that you might kind of look to make some changes this year. But like, what would a typical week of training look like for you?
Typical week for me, Monday I'm in the gym in the morning, and then possibly again in the gym in the afternoon. Tuesday would be a shorter speed session. Wednesday, same thing, probably double gym. Thursday, sort of longer speed. Friday's my off day. And then Saturday, can do gym in the morning, track in the afternoon, normally a speed session. And then Sunday would be sort of either sort of general conditioning, circuit work, or something different like running up hills or running on the beach.
Okay. So in terms of like your, again, I know this is going to vary, but like what might a typical, if you're talking about like short speed
Mm,
on your, I
yeah.
think that was your Tuesday. So it's Tuesday,
Yes, yeah.
Thursday, Saturday, they're your track days, correct?
Yes, yeah, yeah. And
Um,
and Thursday as well, but longer stuff, normally like 150s or that kind of
okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what might like a typical track session look like for each of those days? So for like a
Yeah.
Tuesday, Thursday, and then a Saturday.
Sort of depending what phase we're in, we'll either be
Yeah.
focusing more on sort of block starts and acceleration work or sort of, more top end running. So in block starts and stuff, we'll do some resisted starts, some unresisted starts, maybe some sleds, sort of that sort of work. And then when we're more in the sort of top end kind of phase, like fast float fasts, 15, 30, 15,
Yeah.
or shorter sprints, 80s and that sort of stuff.
And
We've
how
been
many sort of
experimenting
like
around.
numbers of reps would you be doing of that kind of stuff? If you're coming in, let's
Not
say
too
for example,
many.
you're doing
Yeah.
80s, how many would you do?
Maybe like three. Yeah.
Okay, with
And
pretty good
even
recovery.
yeah. Oh, very good recovery. So we like to say for every second that you're fully exerting yourself, you probably need a minute recovery at
Right.
least. But our coach never pressures us. If you want to sit down for 2 more minutes, you're fine.
Yeah.
But block starts, we might do three weighted, three non-weighted, um, shorter runs and stuff. Yeah, there's never really too many reps. Even my tougher sessions when I'm doing stuff like maybe 250, 200, 150, 100, 4 reps.
Okay.
It's never super tough. Maybe in the winter, we'll do more sort of speed endurance and running a bit more further, running a bit more reps. But I think what we've ended up discovering, just how things work with me, is I tend to react better to just doing less, especially on the track.
Okay.
The less and short and more intense my reps are, the better I tend to react to it. And I think better to get, more high quality work than more high quantity work for me.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if you were doing that 250 down to step down to 100 meters, those
Mm,
four reps, so 250, 200, 150, 100.
yeah.
Again, are you sort of like roughly adhering to that 1 minute recovery per second run rule, or would it would be a little bit shorter than
Yeah,
that?
maybe a little bit shorter just because it's freezing cold here, so you don't really want
Right.
to be sitting outside for 20 minutes and
Yeah, yeah.
freezing. But so we tend to get it done a little bit quicker. But yeah, taking just as much recovery as you'd need. You don't want to be rocking up to your next rep and your heart's still beating and you're still feeling tired. You want to be running quality. So
Okay.
we make sure we're really ready for the next rep. Sometimes we'll even flip it on its head and run the 100 first and then work up to the 250. With the theory that you want to be running maybe the quicker reps first and getting them out of the way, and then
Hmm.
your 100 will be high quality. Whereas if you start with the 250, by the time you get to the 100, it's going to be a shitty run. So sometimes we flip it
Yeah.
on its head, and sometimes we play around. But we definitely do take plenty of recovery. It won't be all we do in the session. There'll be other stuff as well, plyometrics or
Yeah.
jumps or maybe shorter things, maybe starts beforehand or that kind of stuff. But in terms of actual running reps, we never really do more than I'd say six.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you kind of keep that kind of quality focus sort of throughout the year as well. So kind
Yes.
of
Yeah.
like in the depths of winter, or when you're just kind of getting started. So let's say, for
Mm.
example, you start next week.
Yeah.
Would the recoveries would still be pretty good on those kind of like longer runs?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no need for me to, I'm not trying to run 400s
Yeah.
or
Okay.
anything else. I'm never really going to have to run when I'm tired, when I'm in competition. There's
Hmm.
always a few
Hmm.
hours between a heat and a semi, or a semi and a final, whatever.
Yeah.
So for building good strength endurance, maybe if I want to move to 200s, could look at doing that sort of stuff. But I'm pretty happy sticking to the 100 for now.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of running around the bend, being quite tall. It's just not something I I think I'm great at, and I think it's probably one of the things that helped to lead towards some of my previous hamstring injuries. So
Right.
for now, I'm focusing on keeping it on the straight. And once I'm maybe a better all-round refined athlete, then I can look at moving back up to twos, and I don't know, maybe I'll run a 4 for fun. We'll see.
Doesn't sound fun to me, mate.
No, not me neither. But I keep getting people. The New Zealand record for the 400 meters is only I think it's 46:09. I
Okay.
keep getting people asking me like, "Oh, mate, we've seen you dip just under 33 for a 300 time trial. Surely you can take that 400-meter record."
Yeah.
And I'm
Okay.
thinking, if my life depended on it, I could probably, crawl that last 100 meters and get in 45 high or 46 low, but it just seems very painful for something that's probably only going to, make people be like, "Oh, you broke the record. You should
Yeah.
run more fours." And then I'm going to be like, "No."
And you end up back where you started. That's what I was thinking with
Exactly.
400
Yeah.
meters. You've not
You're not
net
going
displacement is
anywhere.
zero. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
great point. I've never even thought about that, but I like that. You're not even net displacement zero. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
And what would a Saturday type workout look like for you then?
Saturdays are normally very similar to Tuesdays. Yeah.
Okay.
If not the same, exactly
Right.
almost. Yeah.
Okay. So you sort of like, you kind of got two sort of acceleration / speed
Yes. Yeah.
sessions, and then sandwiched
Yes.
in the middle, you kind of got like a more speed endurance-y type.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And then on Sundays, we're either doing sort of a recovery session. So
Yeah.
maybe general circuit, general conditioning. That's sometimes when we'll do form runs or hitting the tire with a hammer or whatever. And if
Okay.
it's not that, we'll be running up hills or running on sand. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. A little bit softer kind of in terms of impact as well on the
Yes,
joints.
yeah, and
Yeah.
just also working different muscles, right?
Yeah.
Every time I go do a beach session, especially if it's the first one of the block, I come back and my feet are just sore because you're using
Right.
muscles that you don't normally use, and it's good training too. It's good resistance running, and that's certainly something I know they do in many other parts of the world. Running on grass, running on sands makes it a lot easier when you then pop spikes on and run on the track. So
yeah, definitely. When you're doing the beach runs, are you doing that barefooted?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So
100%.
some really
Yeah.
good sort of like
Soft
target those sort
sand.
of like intrinsic foot muscles to.
Yes, yeah, because that's what I need to work on as well. I've weak,
Okay.
fat, and flat feet.
Okay.
I'm
And you
not
spoke
very
about
strong.
stiffness.
Yeah, I need to work on my stiffness and my bounciness. My RSI is not bad off 2 feet. I think I'm just over 4. But on single foot stuff, oh, it's terrible. It's under 2. It's like 1.8. It really needs to be a lot better, especially the level I'm at now. It should be a lot better. I've just been, I think, muscling my way through most of my races. So yeah, once we sort that out, once I'm able to bounce a bit better, once my calves are a bit stronger, my tendons and everything are a bit stiffer, I see no point why I shouldn't be able to keep my speed a bit more efficiently. The quickest I've split a 10 meter in is actually 0.86. So I know I can get up to a good speed, but it's whether I'm able to maintain that speed for the last 40 or 50 meters versus just hitting that and then immediately starting to slow down.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And so I noticed, I think it was Monday and Wednesdays that you said you potentially double up on the gym days. So kind of how does that work? What would be the AM session and what would be the PM session?
So in the AM, I'll go into the high performance center, and like I said, they've got some fancy machines there. I can't go into too much detail because I think patents are still out pending. But one of them is basically a bike that pedals against you, and the other one's kind of like a thing that's pulling you up and down, and you're trying to resist it. So sort of really interesting, more eccentric work than anything else. And trying to develop that stiffness. So those things are very demanding. It's very tough. Those machines that really do push you and really do tire you out. It's like a max effort kind of thing quite often. And then I'll also do most of my major lifts in the morning. So I'll do my cleans and stuff while I'm there, maybe some other bits and bobs. And then in the afternoon, I'll go to another gym where I can gym with my, squad and people that are my friends and stuff. And I'll do all the sort of smaller things there, hip flexor work or some of the bouncy drills or the rest of it. So maybe do like a 2-hour session in the morning and then another 2-hour session in the afternoon. Realistically, probably could squeeze everything into 3, maybe 3.5-hour session, but you don't want to be stuck in one place for too long. I think it's better to take a bit of a break in between, and then you can get more done in the end of the day, which is, I think, the better way to do it.
Okay, so essentially, kind of got like the big sort of like compound type movements going on in the morning, then the more sort of ancillary exercises taking place later in the day.
Correct, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then I know, I guess this sort of like feeds in a little bit to what you were talking about in terms of improving stiffness and sort of being a little bit more efficient later on in the race.
Mm.
But you've gone into some great detail there with the with sort of like the programming aspects of your training, but thinking about some of the technical aspects of it, and some of the cueing. Are there any sort of cues that you feel like really resonate and have really been quite effective for you in terms of your running, or are there any kind of cues that you're trying to
Mm.
work on in order to again sort of like continue to sort of up the level ahead of Paris next year?
Yes, definitely. The two best cues for me, I found are in the first half of my race, I really need to focus on staying low, staying down. Sometimes I pop up too quick, and
Okay.
that's a bit of a mess because that first half of the race, like I said, is my strong point.
Mm-hmm.
So the longer I stay down and the longer I can push and make use of my strength and power, the better off I'm going to be for the later half of the race. And
Mm-hmm.
when I get into the later half of the race, the main cue I'm telling myself over and over in my head is just to pop off the ground. Straight up and down is what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking about forward or clawing back or pushing anymore. I'm really just trying to bounce. I'm going straight up and down. That's the main thing I'm focusing on.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that was such a crucial point that you made in terms of how the impact of what you do throughout the first part of the race, and sort of how that affects the latter part of the race.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you know, it allows you to accelerate more efficiently and reach a higher top speed, but it also it allows you to accelerate for longer. So then you kind of got
Yes,
less time at
exactly.
the end of the rate for that speed to
Yeah.
decay.
And that's where I, like I said, that's where I excel. Where in the parts of the race where I'm spending more time on the ground and I have more time to apply my force is when I'm doing well. I think of everyone in the Budapest, I think I had the quickest reaction time and probably the quickest like first maybe 5 meters. But at the end of the day, you know, you're not running 5 meters, you're running 95 more. So you've got to work on the other bit of the race. But it's good to know that I've got that stuff in the bag, and it's more a case of just needing to refine the other bits and bobs rather than, you know, keep developing everything as a whole. But yeah, no, it's good. I certainly enjoy being good over 60. I've always wanted to run some 60s. I've never run an indoor 60. It's one of the things I'd love to look
All
at
right.
doing next year, is potentially coming over somewhere where there's an indoor track. Obviously, we don't have any of them down here in Oceania. I don't think there's any in the Southern Hemisphere, to be
No, I
honest with
don't
you.
think there is either. No.
No,
Yeah.
so I'll have to maybe come up to the UK, somewhere in Europe, maybe even America.
Okay.
I'd love to try and run the auto quali for World Indoors. It's 6:58, I believe.
Okay.
Which is what I split 60 in when I run my 10:14s. So I know I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I just have to get somewhere and do it in an indoor track to get that auto quali so I can head to World Indoors. I think it's in Glasgow next year. So that should be good. I'm potentially, New Balance has told me they might be able to sneak me a spot at the New Balance Indoor GP in Boston.
Okay.
So that'd be a
Yeah.
pretty fantastic place to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That looks like
Yeah,
a great facility.
yeah, that's amazing.
I lived in Boston just before I moved down to Texas, and
Mm.
I was used to use the New Balance gym, in fact. So you kind of
Oh,
saw
cool.
that.
Yeah,
By the time I'd left by the time it was finished, but you kind of saw them like
yeah,
putting up that structure. But yeah, that would be a good one.
yeah.
Another place you want to try and get to Albuquerque and run at the altitude there, and
Yes,
you
yeah.
can bang a 60 out there because
Altitude's always good. We love
yeah,
altitude. The
yeah,
show de
yeah, yeah.
Fonds this year. I want to
Hey,
go
there you
again next
go.
year.
I'm
Oh
sure you
man,
do.
I
Every
was
man
so
and his
gutted.
dog wants to go to Show de Font.
Oh, it was so, we just got unlucky this year. I think, you know, all the previous 3 or 4 years have been heaps of boys dipping under 10 and running, almost everyone running big PBs. And
Yeah.
we got there this year and just the weather wasn't playing along. I think I
I
spoke to the
remember
organizer
this.
and
Okay.
he said it's probably the worst weather conditions he's seen in the 10 years that he's been running this comp. It was raining and it was miserable and we had headwinds and stuff.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
just got unlucky. Our final was into a headwind and that's where I ran my 10:14. So had that been a 1.5 or a 2.0 or anything else, who knows what that could have been on
Yeah.
record. So
Yeah.
just gotta, you know, that's how it goes with the short sprints. You do a lot of training, but you also do need just a little bit of luck sometimes in terms of conditions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, definitely. And that's one of the things I quite like about indoor competitions is the fact that it does neutralize a lot of those external
Yes, yeah.
factors. So, you know, it
There's
doesn't
no
really
wind
matter
to
if it's
worry
cold
about.
outside,
Yeah,
there's no wind, it's not wet.
exactly. Because wind's the biggest problem we have in New Zealand.
Yeah,
It's
right.
so windy here that you're either running into a -1.7 or you're running with a +4.2. And so you're either running terrible times or illegal times, and nothing's useful. So that's one
Yeah.
of the biggest
Yeah.
missions we have here, and why it's better for us to get over elsewhere. But no,
Yeah.
certainly indoor and big stadiums too. You'll never see an illegal wind in a big stadium just because it's so sheltered.
Yeah.
I think back to the stadium in Tokyo where we got, I think, a plus 0.4 and something. I think that's pretty common to see in big stadiums. Budapest as well, didn't really see too many big winds. The track there, I don't know what was up with the track there. We were all thinking it was going to be incredibly fast. It's one of the bounciest tracks I've ever felt. But in saying that, it was also very mushy and soft. And so what I think happened, because obviously of the 39 guys running, in the heats that had dipped under 10 seconds, I think only 5 or 6 guys ended up running sub at Budapest. So my theory is the track was just a bit too soft. Everyone split 60 pretty well. Even in the final, there were a bunch of 6-4 lows. But it was the last 40 where I think people were just mushing into the track a bit more rather than bouncing happily along.
Okay.
And of all the athletes I spoke to, I remember, because we were the first heat, right? So I remember running and I was like, oh, that felt like a real good run. And I looked up at the timing board and 10.26. I was like, oh man, it felt better than a 10.26. That's kind of slow. And I thought, maybe it just wasn't my day. And I went to go sit down in that queue room. And I was thinking, oh, I'll get to sit here maybe for one heat because my time's terrible. I'll get kicked out. And actually got to sit there for like 2 more races. So I was real surprised because all the times kept coming in and I was just like, oh, everyone's just running slow. I spoke to a lad, Sean Maswangani, afterwards, because he's also South African. He's a 991 runner and he was clocking 10.2 as well. So I think, especially the reactive guys might have just been struggling a bit because it was just mushy. I think the track was just a bit soft and a bit slow. I think the same thing happened in the women's races. There weren't many PBs in the men's or women's hundreds. I think they're just I think the track was just a bit slow, but I reckon it's one of those tracks where you give it 2 years to bake in the sun and harden up a little bit, and it's going to be real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is quite interesting what the impact that the climate does have on a track over a couple of seasons. But yeah, I mean, from what you were saying, I think that's an interesting point that I've not really considered in terms of like the softness of the surface. It might have a little bit more of an impact later on in the second half of the race where, like you were saying before, you have less time to apply force, so you want it to be a little bit more responsive.
Yes, you want to just be pinging off the track. You don't want to be mushing down into it because it's going to be sucking the energy out of you. So I think that's probably why I would say, having run on the track and having run there, that's probably why I would say the times are slow. I know a lot of people are saying that this season was a lot slower than Oregon, which it was, to be fair. In Oregon, there were some 9.7s, there was some crazy times, lots of people running personal bests. That just wasn't here this season. I think the track was a bit too soft. Also, the weather was quite tough. I think when you're watching the TV and the Jamaicans are sitting going like this, trying to fan themselves to cool down. Imagine how the poor Kiwis and the people from up northern Europe that are cold, they're boiling. It was pretty hot, and that stadium
I heard they
was
didn't
like
have
sauna.
AC in the cool room or the warm up area or something.
No AC in there, and then the stadium there was no big fans or anything to keep the air flowing, so it was just like the air in the stadium was just stagnant and hot, especially once the big crowd was getting in there. Even sitting in the crowd, it's boiling in there. It honestly felt like it was 40 degrees. So definitely really hot. If you didn't manage your heat properly, it would have definitely, I think, sucked a bit out of you. So it was tough conditions, I'd say, especially for me, because I'm used to the cold. So it's something I'll have to continue developing and getting better at, is running in the heat. But heat should be good. Heat's normally good. I think for ideal conditions, you're probably high 20s, low 30s. At those temperatures, your nerves are firing quicker and everything's firing quicker. So that's normally when people tend to run their best times. But I think Budapest was just a little bit too hot, especially on that first and second day. It was cooking.
Yeah, I remember seeing some people. I can't think off the top of my head of any names, but some people being. Well, I think Stephen Gardner of the Bahamas, wasn't he, kind of pushed out on a wheelchair after the first round, and people sort of like citing dehydration and like heat stroke, that kind of thing taking place.
No, it was tough, and there were ice baths and things, but there just wasn't much shade as well, especially on the warm-up track. We had our team tents and things, but they were quite far away from the warm-up track. It was, you couldn't do your warm-ups and then hide in the shade a little bit, and then do some more warm-ups and then hide in the shade a little bit. So what I did is I actually just ended up taking a pack of ice with me, and I'd do a couple of drills and then stick some ice cubes under my armpits or whatever, just to try and cool down again, because it was just so blooming hot. It was boiling. It was really cooking. And when it's hot outside and you can take your shirt off or whatever, that's one thing. But when you're in a speed suit and it's like skin tight speed suit, you're starting to sweat, you're starting to cook, especially me and my black speed suit, because New Zealand's the only country that's
Yeah,
just
right.
all black one as well. So I was
Absorbing that
just,
heat.
oh yeah, I was just sitting there soaking up all the sun's rays, but it was pretty good. I enjoyed it.
Okay. I mean that sort of leads quite nicely on to sort of like the next question, which is sort of like
Mm.
monitoring, aspects. Well, I guess this isn't necessarily away from the track, but away from training and just managing things to optimize performance. So I guess two of the things that I wanted to look at in particular, or talk about in particular, was kind of like sleep and nutrition, sort of how closely you monitoring those kind of things with
Yeah.
regards to your performance.
So sleep, I monitor fairly closely. I've got a Whoop band, and
Yeah.
that's what I use to track my recovery, strain, and sleep, and it does a really good job of that. I'm a really big fan of that little bit of kit. I think it's fantastic. I think since I've had it, I've managed to improve a lot of my habits and improve a lot of things like sleep and recovery. And again, this is just that silly little athlete mindset where you see a little number on the screen and you just
Yeah.
want it to be higher. So
Just
I'll be
gamifies
sitting,
it.
literally, yeah, because I'll be sitting there going, "Oh, I should go to bed now if I want a good recovery and a good sleep score tomorrow." And we've got it. You can get little groups in the Whoop as well, like a Whoop group. So me and my squad mates and some of the other athletes are on a group chat together, and you can actually see everyone else's sleep and everyone else's recovery and strain. So it
Right.
adds a bit of
That's cool.
accountability into
Yeah,
it. So I'm
yeah, yeah,
thinking,
for sure.
oh, I've got to go to bed now because I don't want everyone else to see that I've only got 7 hours of sleep or something. I'm trying to set an example of trying to be the one with the best sleep or best recovery or the weekly champion or whatever it is. So I think the Whoop's fantastic. I think it's real good in terms of nutrition. I'm not super strict. I just make sure that I'm tracking my macros, things like protein and carbs. Obviously, living in a South African household, there's plenty of protein here. We eat a lot of
Yeah.
meat, a
Yep.
lot of biltong, a lot of that sort of stuff.
Good. Nice.
Um, and then also just making sure that I get in enough carbs to fuel myself. And also just water as well, making sure I drink enough water is the main thing. I'm looking into maybe including more supplements in my routine in the future. Obviously, there's heaps of good studies and things around the benefits of stuff like creatine or whatever else. There's heaps of stuff. Magnesium, I think another one. Even taking some protein shakes and maybe trying to put on a bit more mass. Although I'm 6'5", I'm only 92, 93 kgs. I could certainly afford to be a little bit heavier as well. I think I did find in the past that when I was at my heaviest was actually when I was running my quickest. And my coach theorized that, well, it's probably just because you've got a little bit more momentum, mate. And so for a person like you who tends to slow down in the latter half of the race due to lack of efficiency, if you've got a bit more mass behind you, maybe you can get away with being a little bit less efficient because you just got more momentum to keep you moving forward. So it's something I'll probably put some effort into before next season, is maybe trying to get up to 95, 96 kilograms, get a bit more muscle on the frame, but also making sure I'm working on that stiffness to be able to bounce that muscle around. So no, it'd be good. But yeah, nutrition, nothing too strict, just making sure I'm not eating unhealthy. I don't have fast food. I don't drink alcohol. So any of that sort of stuff we stay away from, but it's not uber strict. I'm not counting every single calorie and having the same meal every day. There's lots of freedom. I still live at home, so more than often than not, I'm just eating what my parents cook, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's sort of like quite a good headspace. I think there's a risk with nutrition. It can lead you to being quite sort of like neurotic. And
yes, it's a deep rabbit hole for sure.
Absolutely. I think it can be. And, it can lead you sort of to some quite unhealthy habits, if you become too sort of anal about it.
Definitely. I think you look at most sprinters, you look at Bolt when he was in his prime, and a lot of these guys that are running real quick now, and they're not super shredded. You're not seeing you're not seeing the vans on their abs. You're not seeing like super low body fat percentages, just because it's not quite super sustainable. Sure, it looks great, but is that the best way to be running? Is that what's going to be healthiest for your body in terms of recovering and training and all that sort of stuff? And often the answer is no. So, I think it's good to be, eating healthily, but I don't think it's something that you should hyper focus or hyper obsess on about, because when you start doing things like cutting out carbs to try and lose skin folds, that's when you're not fueling properly, and that's when you're not training properly, and that tends to be when the injuries come around as well. So
yeah, I think for me, I think it's all about sustainability, and so like you want habits that are sustainable, that are going to allow you to sustain your training and all that kind of stuff. So then my final question, which is sort of a little bit of a fun one, if you like talking about this stuff. So I hope the audience do. Otherwise, I don't think they'll be tuning in. But favorite and least favorite track sessions. So I mean, I've got a fairly good idea probably what you're going to say for each of them. But yeah, favorite and least favorite track sessions.
I'm sure you can all guess. Yeah, track session, so I'm not allowed to say gym. Is that how it works?
All right, I'll tell you what.
Or any session in general?
Let's go track session, and then I'll make a special
Okay.
exception here, and then we can talk about your
I
favorite
can
lifts and stuff.
do both as well. Yeah. So on the track, I love block starts. It's my favorite thing. I love hopping in the blocks. I love doing those short accelerations where you're just pushing, you're just going resisted or unresisted, don't care. Love getting in the blocks. I've bought myself a pair of the big boy blocks, so your whole foot's on it. We don't actually have those at the track down here, so it's good to have my own pair to be able to train with. And I'm just a big fan. It's obviously what I'm good at. There's no one that's beating me in a block start down here, so I love it. It's good fun, and it's easy. It's not too crazy, strenuous on the body, and I just enjoy it. It's like it's just fun lining up next to people and who's got the best reaction time, who's going to get to the cone first, and that sort of stuff. But it's in a fun environment where it's not like a full-on race. So I love block starts. That's my favorite thing in the world, probably, on the track.
Okay.
And then
least favorite track session? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be hard to guess. It's probably those ones where I'm running a little bit further than I'd like to be, honestly. Anytime I'm running over 100 meters, not a big fan. Anytime I'm running around a bend, not a big fan. So I don't mind track sessions. Where I'm running, I especially love doing the fast float fasts, or the shorter runs, or the 80s, or the 30-30-30s and that kind of stuff, because it's real fun to just feel like you're floating and you're flying for that short little distance. But once you have to do like a 95% effort on a 250 or something, I think it wears off real quick. So that's probably what my least favorite is, and I have to run a little bit further. I don't mind it, and I'm at the point now where when my friends have time trials and things for 300s, I'll happily pace them and that sort of stuff. But when I'm doing my own training, man, I like to keep things short. I'm not a big fan of those longer runs.
Well, I guess pacing a 300 when you've got 33 seconds in reserve, and there's not that many people that are going to be running, that are going to be pushing you, so you can take it a little bit easier, maybe a little bit.
Probably fairly comfortably paced to a 36 or something, running 90%. But it's that extra. It really makes a difference. I think a lot of people underestimate. I can do my reps at 95% real comfortably, but as soon as you start getting up to 98, already there, it's just that extra little threshold that you're breaking through that makes it so much harder. I think we so often train at 90-95% that you get pretty comfortable around there, and you can run your reps real easily around there and with real good form. But then as soon as you're taking things a bit more seriously and you're just trying to really go, it just takes it out of you way quicker than you'd imagine. It just makes it so much harder. And it's only a few little percent more effort, but that's at the point where you're really gunning it, and that's when you're really just burning through your ATP reserves, I think, real quick.
Okay. And I know you wanted to mention gym, so gym. favorite least favorite gym sessions or lifts.
Favorite has to be concentric in the gym, or when we're doing explosive stuff, maybe fast eccentric, and then the worst has got to be the slow eccentric for me. When we're doing slow lowers or any of those things where you're picking something up and putting it down real slowly, it's just agonizing for me. It's just too long, and it's just sitting, we do slow lowers at the trap bar, for example, where it's like you're trying to go down in 6 seconds, and we tend to do this quite heavy, because slow eccentric we do tend to do quite heavy, and it's just terrible. You're just sitting there counting to 6 seconds trying to really slow. It's just horrible. It's good though. I think that's where you make most of your hypertrophy gains, is probably in your slow eccentric training. But for me, like I say, I love the explosive stuff. I love the concentric. I love ripping the bar off the floor when I'm doing cleans, and doing less reps as well, when we're doing 2 reps of each thing versus doing upwards of 5 maybe to 8 reps of each thing. I prefer the shorter, more explosive stuff, and I think I always will, to be honest with you.
I mean, I can't remember if we were recording when we said this, but you're good at it, so why wouldn't you like it, right? That's gonna people tend to enjoy doing what they're good at.
I'm one of those people that when it's gym testing day, I love it. I'm so good at vertical jumps and the watt bike and all that sort of stuff. I'm almost a bit of a I don't know what you'd call me, a gym hero, because I'm probably better than, like I say, a lot of sprinters. You put me on a vertical jump or a broad jump or anything, but then they probably would be quicker than me on the track. So it doesn't really help at the end of the day, right? I think my vertical jumps is almost a meter now. Standing vertical jump. And broad jump, I've managed a 350. So I can certainly get out there, and my lifts are strong, my watt bike's strong, and any of that sort of stuff strong. And I remember actually there was a period when Eddie or saying Keisha was down here training with us.
Mm-hmm.
I'd always whip him in training. Anything we were doing in training, I was just whipping him. But then come the actual race day, and he would just be able to pull it out of the bag. And I just kept thinking, how is this guy like? He's just bouncier. He's just quicker. He's just moving. I'm just, it doesn't help that you're the best in training. You've got to be the best in competition as well. So, but I do love a gym testing though. It's good fun.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I've no doubt that his 100-meter record is maybe a little bit short-lived, and I'm looking forward to seeing you grab that next year.
Absolutely.
I'm very conscious that we're running out of time on the recording.
No worries. Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you, Tiann, for joining us. You've been a great guest, and I want to wish you good luck with your first week of training tomorrow and all the success for 2024. All right.
Thank you so much, David. I'm always up for a chat. I've got a lot more that I can talk about if you want, but thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.